My name is Emily Odell. I'm a research scholar in Islamic law and Islamic civilizations at Yale University, and also an editor for an Islamic law project at Harvard Law School. I started this research in Mongolia several years ago. I started in the capital looking at Islamic spaces, for example, mosques, meeting with Mongolians who had converted to Islam, meeting with Kazakhs from Western Mongolia who were born into Islam, also meeting with migrants who had come from the Middle East, for example, Egypt, to work in Mongolia, and also refugees who were fleeing conflicts in Syria and Yemen, to try to understand the contemporary practice of Islam in Mongolia today from a multitude of perspectives, from people who live here, from people who have traveled here as migrants, as refugees, and those who have converted from various religions and also from atheism to Islam. So I began my research in the capital several years ago, and then this summer I traveled to Western Mongolia thanks to the Field Research Fellowship with my colleagues from the National University of Mongolia and Khuvd University in the West, to explore the contemporary practice of Islam in Western Mongolia, particularly amongst the Kazakh population and nomads who are living in gers, or as we say in English, yurts. What we wanted to look at was Islamic space in the West, such as mosques, to look at the architecture of the mosques, to look at the history of their construction, to look at the transnational linkages those mosques have with Muslim communities in other countries, and to understand how nomads who are living in gers receive Islamic knowledge from, for example, imams and their delegates. So we met with imams in a number of different mosques, as well as administrators, to understand what Islamic practices, what type of Islam is being practiced and being spread with the nomads and supported. And as well as that, we also met with Islamic healers to understand how Islamic knowledge is being drawn upon for healing a number of different ailments, from depression to disability, and how the community ties are strengthened and influenced by Islamic practice. I began thinking about this research when I was in Ulaanbaatar several years ago for a conference at the National University of Mongolia on archaeology, on Mongolian archaeology. And I had helped excavate Mongolian layers of the Islamic bazaar in Merv in Turkmenistan to look at the Mongol destruction of the medieval Islamic bazaar there. So I had been introduced to medieval Mongolian archaeology quite very much directly in a trench with my own hands, and came here to speak about that at the National University of Mongolia. And while I was here, I started to be curious about the modern day practice of Islam in Mongolia because of my former research, previous research in Central Asia, on the Silk Road, on the contemporary practice of Islam in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and also had been recently to Xinjiang, and was interested in these communities today, how in the post-Soviet period they're practicing Islam. And I realized there was an absence in the literature on Mongolia and the practice of Islam here. Nobody had really written in depth about the contemporary practice of Islam in Mongolia, whether it be in the capital or in the West in depth. So I thought that would be a really important investigation for me to put also my other previous research into perspective and to see how contemporary practice of Islam in Mongolia is particularly unique. I did this research in Western Mongolia with the help of colleagues from the National University of Mongolia and also Khuvd University, and their help was indispensable. They had contacts with local Muslims as well as imams and administrators, and I had access that I never would have had if I attempted to do this on my own, as well as of course, their native Mongolian language skills. I've studied Mongolian here at ACMS and also at the National University of Mongolia, but to do this in-depth research, I really needed to lean on them and their local access and knowledge, and I'm very grateful for that. What we discovered on our trip was that the main focus of our research was becoming the interplay of the environment and Islam, how the environment in Mongolia shapes the Islamic space, shapes the needs of the Muslims in that space, for example, with heating when it gets very cold, and how it affects how imams get Islamic religious knowledge out to nomads who are living in gers out on the steppe and far away from these mosques. So we became especially interested in the environment, and for that also I had to really rely on their local knowledge, their knowledge of the environment.